when you look at association or industry data from companies like CEIR and different publications that are basically surveying attendees and surveying events, right? And then on top of just my communication, me being on this podcast, talking to people, I feel like this new value is simple, right? One of which is peer-to-peer, networking, interaction, knowledge share. People want to be around other people solving the same problems they are, dealing with the same problems that they're dealing with. They don't want to hear it from somebody else. They want to hear it from someone that's in the trench, has been there, has done it, is doing it, has maybe lived through it. So it's not being talked at, it's talking with now is a big difference. The second thing I have here is experience. People want an experience. If you're making me leave my house and leave my ecosystem and leave my work from home and my schedule and the busy thing, don't deliver me something that I can do at home, right? Deliver me something that I cannot do at home. Give me an experience. I think people are genuinely seeking experiences when they go to an event. Community and belonging kind of go together for me. I think they're one and the same. It's not always a community, but I do think people feel like they belong when they go to events, right? To the same crowd, same style people. You're talking peer-to-peer. When I'm in a group of CEOs that are running small businesses under the size of $100 million or whatever it is, I feel like I belong. There's a feeling to it. I don't know how to describe it. So I think people are craving community and belonging. I think people want to do workshops. This goes back to peer-to-peer. They want to workshop. They want to not physically work like they're working on a dirt bike or something, but I'm saying they want to do stuff together. They want to engage and think and talk and work through things. The last two I have on my list is meaningful interaction, right? The days of just throwing a networking event and have it be a happy hour with some food, like that's not really meaningful interaction. If you're just herding people into a room and saying this is a networking event, well, I don't really know how meaningful it is because I've seen people roll into those and go and grab a drink and stand off to the side and talk to one or two people. It's not creating what I would consider meaningful interaction. The next piece I have here is, professional development, certifications, right? People want these certifications. They want to develop and progress their career. So I think when you put these together, this is what the new value is. This is what attendees are seeking. This is why people are leaving the home. This is why people are going to an event.
I think that's a really good list, man. Talking with, not being talked to. Experiences, community, meaningful interaction, workshops, right? Like going through something together, right? Like that's kind of like somewhere between meaningful interaction and experience. Echoes what Francisco's saying in the chat. What I keep hearing from conference attendees on why do you still come to this thing is, for me, it's a chance to meet with people I like, people I only see in person once a year, AKA community and sense of belonging. Yet conference organizers don't seem to fully get this, and the formats have really changed. This hurts companies like mine who want and are betting on events as a driver for pipeline and new business opportunities. So,
okay, so I think that's a really interesting point that we can touch on here, right?
Yep.
So if you're talking, let's use a third-party conference as an example, right? So now let's go to the exhibitor, the sponsor side, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So literally at a high level, most people are exhibiting, sponsoring, spending money, going to these events on that side of things for two things. They're going there for pipeline, so sales, right? Leads, sales, pipeline, you call it what you want, right? And they're going there for brand awareness. Okay, got it. So now to what Francisco's describing is essentially saying that now you have the association that's running this event. And if they're running an old playbook, which is the old way of doing things and essentially basically means that they're not orchestrating the things that I just listed, peer-to-peer experience, community, workshops, meaningful interaction, you as the association have to orchestrate those things. You have to do your best to orchestrate, right? So my advice though, to exhibitors, to sponsors is pretty simple. It's you have to deliver this to your attendees, to your customers, to your prospects. This is the playbook, right? So people are going there. Like I wrote a post about this the other day on LinkedIn. I said, no one's there to buy your shit. People are not rolling into the convention center hall like, I can't wait to buy this software system. That's not how it works. They're not there to buy from you. So what do you have to do? It's a bit of a longer cycle, right? You How can you help orchestrate, some peer-to-peer networking, some interaction, some knowledge share? Can you do it in your booth? We did it in a podcast, right? We brought in people to have conversations. We held panel discussions. That's what they want. You have to give the people what they want, right? Experience, deliver an experience. Don't just set up a demo stand and pitch your product. Have a theme, deliver an experience, take them through something, tell a story, make it interesting, make it intriguing, stand out, right? Community and belonging. What community and what sense of belonging does your customer want? If you don't know that, if you don't know who they are, how can you really deliver this, right? Mm-hmm. Workshops, how can you orchestrate things like that? When you use that as a playbook, now you're getting meaningful interaction with your customer, with your prospect. Whereas the old playbook is that you think the meaningful interaction is just coming because everybody's there and that they're forced into the trade show hall or that they have to roll into a keynote. You have to create the meaningful interaction, and meaningful interaction for your customer is not what you want, it's what they want. That's what I think.
Man, what I'm hearing in what you're saying, Matt, that I hadn't really totally thought through until right now. Right now, when Francisco put that in there, right now with your response, is the idea that as entrepreneurs, we understand that when there's a gap, there's an opportunity to be filled.
Yep.
And it feels like we're almost at the sweet spot right now where events have come back and people all want to go to them, and they're still doing it the old way. And while eventually event organizers are going to switch around and start, really giving people what they want as the organizer.
There's some already doing it.
Some are already doing it. But for right now, in your industry, there's a high probability that it's an event doing it the old way. It's people showing up to what Francisco said, saying, damn, man, why did I leave home for this? And you as an exhibitor, you as the person that's there activating in the event, have this unique opportunity to show up with oh, I got you. Here's what you wanted. I can give it to you. And it creates this moment in time where I think the greatest opportunities happen during context shifts, because there is this arbitrage of who's doing it the way that it's demanded versus the way that it used to be demanded.
Yeah.
So I find that to be really exciting, man. And when you talk about it, it makes me think of the kind of our journey through Exhibitor Live and how we showed up serving the old way with some new advice, with some new techniques, AKA showing up exhibiting. Was it a 20 by 20? What size was the booth?
10 by 30.
10 by 30 with great theme, people stopping and asking, the podcast as an engagement technique and a follow-up and whatever. They worked really well. But the next year we showed up and we went all in on this stuff, and instead showed up as, hey, we're doing an event the night prior so people can get together and run our podcast there. Then we're teaching a class the following time. Then we're doing a karaoke night, right? I feel like that's almost the exciting part of this conversation is that in this in between, there is that massive opportunity.
Yeah. So one note I made here as we were kind of talking about this is one of the stats I've seen that I think is pretty glaring that people need to pay attention to. And this is for third-party conferences, but also for host events, because host events have exhibitors and sponsors just on a smaller scale, right? Mm-hmm. But from all the data that I have seen, there is a 1/3 exhibitor turnover year over year. That's a lot.
A lot.
And I think it has a lot to do with people not, as exhibitors, spending money, not seeing the value that they're receiving from the show. But then the question I would ask in return is, well, is the attendee getting the value? Are you there for two totally different reasons? Mm-hmm. How is that ecosystem being married up? Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of a chicken and the egg. And I think it's a little bit of the reason why a lot of companies are going to throwing their own host events versus relying on association and third-party events. True. But I would urge people, if you're exhibiting at large third-party conferences, you have to change up your approach. You have to give people what they want. If you think they're just going to wander to your booth and be curious about you and what you do, and that they're just exploring new tools and resources and products and services, they're not. They're not there to get pitched. They're not there for that. But what they are there for, they are a little curious. They're looking for experience. They're looking for interaction. So how can you orchestrate that yourself? And I think you can do that in the booth, and I think you can do that out of the booth.
100%.
Point of view is a lot of people will work at companies where your company already has a point of view. You already have a starting point. You don't have to create a point of view. And a point of view to me is an opinion, a thought, a belief that you have on your industry, that you have on the problems in your industry, or a way of doing things. I think the hill that you die on type thing is like, what does your company believe? Right? I mean, people remember stories. People remember, just giving people like feature and benefit sell. It only takes you so far. People want story. They want to know your beliefs. They want to know who you are. A lot of companies, and for event marketers thinking, how do I take our point of view? Your company may already have it. Most companies do. You just have to find it. You have to sort of eke it out of your leadership, eke it out of, or it may just be incredibly obvious.
Yeah. And really what's important about it is what Matt talks about is how can it get you into a conversation, right? It can't just be like, well, we do security defense, so that's why we're here. It's something that gets you into a conversation, and there's a recipe for this thing, right? I like to explain this in the sense that you never really start a conversation with anybody. The best you can hope for is that you join a conversation that's already going on in their head. So if you're going to start a conversation with somebody, there's a recipe for the POV, and it starts with this idea of how the world is, right? Something we can all kind of agree upon, right? Like it's this idea of, hey, we can, like, you'll recognize it in how we started this thing, right? Like we can all agree upon the idea that event marketers do more with, or are asked to do more with less, right? And there's a big problem behind that. And it's just like, you all are starting to, you then get into the problem of like, yeah, but you're asked to do more with less, and then you're thrown into a fishbowl, right? Then you talk about the symptoms of the problem to get people to buy more and more in agreement. And once people are really in agreement, now you can present this new way of doing this. Podcast is a trade show booth, right? And then if you really want to finish and close the deal, you talk about the new world as is.
So just one thought I'm having as we're walking through this here is like, when you're talking about how the world is, and the problem with it. One thing I think about when it comes to a customer, or like when we're selling to our customers and having those conversations, whether you're a judge, selling yourself to a community, whatever it may be, the word that comes to my mind is empathy.
Yeah.
Because when you're creating a story and you're starting with a story of how the world is, the problems with it, there's this empathy, there's this group empathy that goes with it. And people latch to stories. They latch to things that are familiar to them. I use the example all the time. It's the same thing. When a comedian tells a joke that is super obvious and everybody cracks up laughing, it's not overly clever, right? But it's obvious. You all deal with it. It's all happened to you. The whole room laughs. And this is seemingly the same concept.
To your point, empathy, right? Like I think there's some real genius in how you designed this thing as Hotel Rockway, because it's based on your POV, right? So like maybe you can, so people can start to conceptualize and start thinking about it. You can share it.
All right. Essentially, at Rockway, our point of view on the trade show event industry, on our market, is that trade shows and events are a sales and marketing strategy. They are not a cost of doing business, which means they must be treated and executed as such. So where this stems from is me years being in the industry and working with exhibitors and our customers and just questioning so much of the stuff that goes on, because what I see is I hear myself years and years ago talking to customers who are spending $100,000 on a trade show booth. That doesn't include the space. That doesn't include the flights, travel, sponsorship, all that. And when I ask them why they're doing this, what are the goals? What are the objectives? It's, well, we always go, or our competitors are there, or, well, if we don't go, people will think something's wrong. That to me was just always like, I don't want to say it sounds crazy because I think that's offense. Not really crazy. I think it's actually super normal, but it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense to spend all that money. That means you're treating it as a cost of doing business, which then to me stems back to why budgets get cut. It's why people say, oh, we're in a 20 by 30 this year, but we have $40,000 less. And I'm like, I don't even know where to begin, because what you were spending prior was barely enough. And we were making magic happen. So my point of view has come in the fact that some of the best companies we work with, they are dialed. They're dialed into who the customer is. They're dialed into why they're at the show. They're dialed into the objectives that they need to walk away and what those objectives achieve when it comes to pipeline, brand awareness, customer acquisition. And it just led me to thinking like, this is a hill that I want to die on. This is a hill that I want my company to die on, which is that when you work with Rockway, we believe that trade shows and events are a sales and marketing strategy, and they are not a cost of doing business. So we are going to work as if and treat them and execute them with you like a sales and marketing strategy. So all the questions, all the thought, all the work that we do will go into how do we get you results. So that's my point of view.
I love it, buddy. I thought you did pretty good there, man.
All right. It's not bad, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is,
this is a point of view, right? Like, but then when you tell the story, you got to be able to expand it that way. So give you another example, right? My company, Be the Stage, was founded on the idea, on the point of view that if you're not building a community, you're going to become a commodity. And the way that I talk about it is, 63% of small business owners believe that more than half of their business comes from word of mouth, but 80% don't have a strategy for it. That means that what they're really spending money on is look at me marketing. It's tricks for clicks. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? But the truth of the matter is that it's only getting harder and harder to get the consumer to talk to you. Studies have shown that in the 60s, the average consumer was being served 76 ads per day. By 2007, it was up to 98.5 per day. Anybody want to guess what it is now? Matt, you have a number of what it is now?
I would say probably, I would say more than 10x the number that you just gave.
4,000 to 10,000 ads per day. Right? 4,000, 10,000.
Half of Facebook is one big ad now. I mean, when you're scrolling Facebook, if you've caught on to this, it's just ads. It's not even, especially if your dwell time on Facebook is sitting on that ad, they will just keep giving you ads and not giving you a feed of the people that essentially, I don't know if you're on there to watch people.
And what do you think is going to happen now with AI coming through and making it easier for people to make graphics, make it easier for people to write? It's going to go up exponentially again. So it's only going to get harder. There's a content apocalypse coming. It's impossible to break through noise, right? Like it's only going to be the big businesses that have huge ad budgets that are able to like compete at that like commoditization level.
Pablo, I think one thing to touch on this with the point of view, right, is this. People and buyers in B2B, they want to do their own research. They want their own time to do their own research. And that research has changed. I mean, like, if you want to know anything about Rockway, like, yeah, you could go to our website. Sure, you could. But with the availability of information out, people are going to watch our LinkedIn. They're going to go to our TikTok. They're going to look at our Instagram. They're going to read our newsletter. They're going to absorb us. And hopefully, one of the messages that they're getting is our point of view. And they're going to say that's who they are. And then it's going to be their decision. Do they want to work with somebody like that? So I think the way buyers consume and the way that they buy now is very, very different. And in marketing, the old adage is that 3% is the bottom of the funnel. 3% are buying right now, right? And that's great. But I think that 97%, they are the ones doing their research, doing their homework. They want information from their peers. They want information. People are getting information from Reddit. They're getting it from Reddit because it's a community of people. It's not pushy. It's not running ads against them. They're looking for that peer-to-peer approval, the information, and they want to educate themselves because they can. So that's where I think, kind of going full circle on this, why the point of view is so important from your company. Again, you don't have to create the point of view. It may not be your job to do that, but go figure out what is it. Ask marketing, CEO, whoever, what's the point of view? And then drive it in the ground.
Yeah, totally. And just as an example, Matt, if you'll just kind of let me land this thing, because I was going exactly there next, right? Like there's all this data that shows that
land the plane. Go ahead.
That this isn't working, right? Consumer behavior has changed. We're going to our peers, right? Like that's what we're doing, right? And at the end of the day, that we're going to our peers because we trust our peers. We trust word of mouth more than anything else. So we need to figure out a way to systemize word of mouth. And we believe that you can. We believe that if you put the right words in people's mouths, right? Like if you sound like everybody else is not going to work, you got to give people a reason to be like, oh, okay, this is why it works for me. If you put it in the right mouths, right? Like not just your sales team, but your other industry experts, your best clients, your partnerships, people around there that are respected, it's going to develop that. And if you create a watering hole, right? If you create the place where people that are wondering whether you're good get to interact with people that really believe you're good and get to listen to those conversations. If you build a community, you're systemizing this word of mouth play, right? So like you can either be doing tricks for clicks or look at me marketing, or you can be building a community, right? And if you're doing the first one, you're building a commodity. If not, you're totally building this moat. So that's our POV, right? So when we talk about the content that you can create from this, right? And what we want you all thinking is, does my company have a point of view, right? Like Matt said, it doesn't have to be, you might not have to have that exact formula written out somewhere, but what is the hill that your company will die on? It can be this idea of the event marketer is underutilized and people are looking at the event marketing wrong and they're overspending and under supporting the people that need to do it. It can be, hey, we've got another client that is a property manager that basically says property management companies make the most when you're in your worst position, when people move out and they got to find somebody new. We make the most when people stay longer, which is better for your property, right? Like that's a big deal. Or the other one is the whole, like, we believe in this cause, Patagonia. We believe in sustainability so much that we're willing to leave profit on the table to make this thing happen. If you're with it, you want to buy our stuff, right? So like what is the thing that you're willing to die on? You got something to add to that, Matt?
Yeah, well, yeah, what I was going to say is I think a lot of people are in seats when you work for a company. Like I said, you probably do not have control over the company's point of view. And Pablo and I understand that completely. So I think you're going to have to be crafty about what you get and from whom. So it doesn't always need to be some point of view that him and I are describing. Your company, it could just be really great messaging. Some companies have incredible messaging. They have one-liners that are just nail it. It just hits it. It's a great single message, and it is who that company is and what they're all about. We're just trying to get your brain turning as to how to leverage the point of view, great messaging, problem you solve, and that empathetic bridge to your customer to leverage it for events.
Yeah, love it.
Brand experience framework, right? So let me just give you a quick framework. I've talked about this before. Number one is why. It's asking yourself, why are we exhibiting? Why are we here? Why are we at this event? You need a real why. Because we've always gone is not a real why. It could be the why, but it's not a real why, right? Customer. You need a really good breakdown of who your customer or who the customers are, right? Who is exactly at this event that you were engaging? What do they mean to you? And what do you mean to them? You have to have that real understanding. That's two. The third is brand. Your brand. What makes you unique? What makes you different? What's your vibe? What's your point of view? Who are you as a company? That's the third. The fourth is going to be goals and objectives. You got to have goals and objectives. So if you have just those four things, your why, your customer, the brand, goals and objectives, if you can dial into those four things, so much is possible to go execute the right way. So now what we're talking about is taking it a step further, and it's saying, okay, themes, concepts, ideas, story, narrative. You're hearing me talk about this ad nauseum. The trade show floor is a sea of parody. It is a bunch of trade show booths that look similar, white background, nice layout, decent structure, a lot of nice trade show booths. The companies that win are the companies that show up with themes, the ones that show up with ideas, the ones that are telling their audience a story about them or a story about their customer that they are seeing empathy in and understanding. So, two questions I think you want to be asking yourself in this process is, what should people walk away knowing? What do you want your customer after an engagement with you or just walking by? But more so with an engagement, what do you want them to walk away with? Choose one thing. There may be 5. I get it. There's probably 10, but choose one. What is the most important one? If you could have a 30-second conversation with somebody as the most important conversation, what would be that one thing you're going to tell them? And then 2 is, how should they feel? How do you want someone feeling when they leave? Like, I always think about this podcast as an example and this live show. How do I want people to feel when they leave this podcast? And I always think to myself, I want them to think that I give a shit about the information that we are giving to them, that it means something, that they can take it and go actionably use it in their life. So that is something that I feel about this podcast, right? So you have to think about that in your trade show booth. How do you want your customer to leave feeling? It could be you just want them leaving feeling happy. You want them feeling like, wow, that's the coolest brand in home security that I've ever seen. Like, whatever, just decide what that is. And then with the information that we just kind of walk through, you're building themes, you're building concepts, you're building ideas, you're creating a story. Then you can go design a trade show booth. Stop designing a trade show booth before you have all of this information. And if you're working with somebody that is not asking you this stuff and is start designing you a trade show booth, you're going backwards. You need this information first. The design of the booth then follows. And then that is how you go execute, in my opinion.
I love it, Matt. I don't think you've ever told me this whole idea of you think about this in the podcast all the time, right? Of like, how you want people to feel. Cause it's real, right? Like any kind of engagement that you're doing, whether it's a trade show booth, whether it's a brand experience, I think about it when it comes to whether it's a conversation, right? Like I just think about it when it comes to networking or anything like that. This idea of what should people walk away knowing and how should they feel is the key to empathy, right? Like at the end of the day, at a very base level, everybody wants to feel seen to a certain extent, right? So like, I would say start there, like start like, how do you ensure that they were like, oh, this team, this person, they really get me. They really get us. And then how do you build upon that? And I love, man, I know that I've said this in past podcasts, but this idea when it comes specifically to trade show booth and brand experience strategy, this idea of person needs to process all this visual information, be like, and then walk up to someone and be like, what's the deal with this thing?
Yeah.
And engineering it so that the deal with this thing is that point of view we just worked on. That to me really feels like, man, you're really doing it at a black belt level, man.
I think what you're talking about, I think this is like utopia to me. And I hope this happens for somebody, right? Is essentially your customer walks into your exhibit space and they're talking with somebody and they're like, hey, why is your booth a carnival theme? Why are you Barnum's and Bailey? Why are you this theme? It's a great question. You're eliciting curiosity. You're garnering attention. You're standing out by somebody walking in your booth and asking you, why are you a tequila bar? Why are you a carnival circus? Like whatever the theme is, it's gaining attention. It's standing out. There's so much going on. And the utopian, like the big goal is to be able for the answer as to the why has to do with the problem that you solve for them. So they are like, oh, that's awesome. That makes sense. And I think that's easier said than done. But to me, it's the goal. To me, it should be the goal. And again, a lot of people go to trade shows. People know who they are, right? So you're not going to get people being like, oh, why are you this? But you still may, even if someone knows who you are. Like I had people that I know in our industry say to me, Matt, why is your guys' booth? What's Hotel Rockaway? That's what everybody kept saying. What's Hotel Rockaway? Yeah. And I was like, oh, funny you should ask. And I would say, hey, it's a boutique hotel, a boutique experience, right? Right. And you jump into the spiel, intentional design, personalized. I mean, what do you get at a boutique hotel? They are always intentionally designed. They're a little wacky. They're a little different. They're niche. They're specific, right? So it's that intentional design. And for us, if someone says, what's intentional design? I just start walking them through story, theme, narrative. We are not just going to design you something just to design it, right? And then you go to personalized service. I would hope that at a boutique hotel had personalized service. They're typically less number of rooms, smaller hotels, yada, yada, yada. So
what's the last piece of that moniker? Because I think it's just as important, man. It was intentional design, personalized service.
And the sleepless nights.
And no sleepless nights.
The experience. It's getting the experience at a hotel like that. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's the idea that as an event marketer, all you're doing is stressing out all day long. If we can take this idea, is the booth going to look beautiful off your plate? You can sleep well. Yeah. That is your client being seen, being heard. Yeah. Right. So like, to me, that idea of like intentional design, that's about you. Personalized service, it's about us. Yeah. And then no sleepless nights. That's like, oh man, if I got that at a conference, that's what I want as an event marketer for sure.
Everyone says ROI, ROE, right? You know, return on investment, return on experience. And I hear the conversation. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants quantitative data to be able to say, yes, this is worthwhile, or no, this is not. I think events, trade shows, conferences are far more elastic than just, yes, we got ROI, we spent $180,000, we made $1 million. That is something that you should know, but I think they're far more elastic. And I'll go into what I think. So I think if you're running a full event marketing program, gotta remember, everyone's program is different. Everyone's industry is different. The sales cycles are different. The customers are different. There's so many variables that go into it. So you have to take what I'm saying, and then you have to be able to apply it to yourself in some form or fashion, right? But I think when you think about trade shows, when you think about events, this is essentially the impact that is going to be made is net new deals. Of course, everybody wants brand new deals. They want someone to walk up on a show floor or come to an event that doesn't know them and say, and write business for them, right? Come in, enter the pipeline, get a contract.
In 30 days.
Yep. In 3 days.
Yes.
Deal acceleration, right? Do you have deals in your current pipeline that there's a touch point at an event, and that touch point is part of the reason that it accelerates a good experience, a good conversation, clarifying something for them. 2 is deal tagging, right? I think people should be able to tag all deals that have a touch point at any event. And what I mean by that is it doesn't mean it needs to be the lead source. The lead source is meant to be where it originally came from, which I can go on about the idea that that is super complicated to do, especially the bigger company that you get. It is super complicated to understand the original place that a deal came from. Sometimes easy, sometimes not. But what I mean by deal tagging is if you have a touch point at an event with a customer, you should be able to tag it as an event, meaning we've had a conversation. They attended a dinner. They showed up at our booth. They did an offsite, go-kart racing with us, whatever.
Yep.
Because I think over time, you'll be able to find a trend in there because of all the deals that got touched, right?
Yep.
Customer resurgence. I mean, how many times are you at an event where you meet with a current customer, they're spending 10 grand, 3 grand, 40 grand, whatever the number is. But then you have a meeting, you settle things, you have a discussion. Maybe it's a rekindled relationship, new person in the seat, but then they start spending more.
Yep.
Well, that event was something that rekindled that. It wasn't a cold email to them. It was being at the event, inviting them to dinner, those nuances of the event, the face-to-face, that feeling you get with an individual. So that needs to be a piece of it. I put here like stage 1 unlock, which I think for me is like, there's so many big companies that get people stuck in that stage 1. They downloaded a form. They did something super, super basic. So they're kind of in this weird funnel where they're getting emails, cold calls, different things. But what if they show up at an event? How many of those deals can you unlock that get stalled out in that first beginning phase? And then the last 2 are like big partnerships and kind of the distributor model method, right? Is I don't care what anybody says. I am all for digital marketing and all the other methods in which dollars can go into marketing outside of conferences and events. But at the end of the day, when you are talking big partnerships and big impactful ones and very large deals, they happen in person. They happen face to face. They happen having dinner. They happen over breakfast, having drinks together, spending 2 days, sitting in a room, hashing things out, deciding that this could be a good fit. So that's what I mean by pipeline impact. Net new deals, deal accelerating, tagging deals, customer resurgence, big partnerships. This is what events do.
Yeah.
The brand awareness piece is a whole nother section I won't even get into, but this is what's happening at events. And how do you measure that to the best of your ability with what you do and the deals you have, I think is something that people all need to get a grip on as fast as they can.
I love it, man. So I'll recap. It is the new relationship is always a reason why people went to events. That is the whole like awareness, right?
They
like,
say net new. Yeah. But yeah, I understand.
I remember in the panel episode, people started talking about like, you got to redefine what awareness means, right?
Bar
like,
said that.
Yeah.
It's 100%. What really is brand awareness? What does it mean? And I think what he was referring to is something him and I have even talked about, which is back in 2000, you had to go to the annual conference. You had to go. The internet wasn't as mature. Think about the maturity of the internet. LinkedIn, Zoom info, the technology. You can get a hold of anybody, anywhere, anytime. You couldn't do it back then, right? You couldn't target them on Facebook. You couldn't target them. Anyway, back then you had to go to the annual conference. You don't need to anymore. You don't. You technically could make a case that you don't have to. And I think that's the point he's making. It's not enough just to say, hey, brand awareness. It's just not enough anymore.
Yeah, got it. So I guess I took us down the wrong rabbit hole there. But,
sorry,
but net new is one, right? Can we find new deals? Can we find new clients? It's something that people have always been going to events for. On top of that, there's been a giant shift in the customer, there was like a paradigm of like, you need to have 6 touch points with a client with a prospect before they become a client. That's increased exponentially. It's gone from 6 to 20 something.
Yes.
And you're saying that there needs to be a tagging for touch points at events.
Yes.
So that you can start counting those touch points, right? It might be a marketing thing. It might be a Facebook ad, but at an event,
I think
you can touch them a couple of times.
Events are the escalator, my friend.
And
they accelerate faster than that email, that call.
Correct. So maybe like when we're looking at this deal tagging, maybe when we're looking at touch points, not all touch points are created equal. Maybe I drive past a billboard one day, that counts for X, but if I see you at an event and I spend this much time with you, that should be factored a different way. So like tagging kind of like those touch points, then deal acceleration. So people that knew you, that were in the pipeline, that had awareness, but now they move on to the next phase of their buying journey. I think that
maybe
that's
it's a stalled proposal. I mean, how many proposals do big companies have out there that aren't getting signed? But they end up at the event, they come through, they answer a question that maybe there was a disconnect on. There's so much that happens at these events. There's so much granular detail that it's the reason why subjectively people are like, events are great. You know what I mean? That is a piece of the reason, because there's so much real good stuff that's happening.
This is a proposal I have on my desk. It's an initiative I want to do, but for whatever reason, I'm not convinced. And then I see how well you pull this thing off. And I'm like, oh, you guys are good. It's the look, touch, feel. Now I believe it. I can move forward, right? Then there's customer resurgence. This is I forgot how much I love these folks, right? I'm already a client. I might be a low-level client, but I might be ready to like up my engagement with you, go the bigger package. They didn't realize you have new services, new different things, forgot how much they love you. And then there's finally the last two, which is
big partnership, distribution.
Activating your partnership. When you go at things together, you know, webinars is one way, but like if you're doing something in person, again, it's an accelerator. And then channel management to me is like the whole like distribution thing. If you are somebody that sells through channels, to have your buyer, your channel partner, and the other person in the same room is super, super powerful. I love that, man. Let's talk about the event marketer, right? Our listener, what has changed in her world?
Well, there's a her and him.
Sure.
There's a lot of hers.
We can do both.
I would say one of the biggest things is it's strategy and approach versus just execution, right? They're being asked to do stuff more, not asked, they have to do stuff more intentionally. They have to be more strategic. It's two pieces. Just executing almost becomes no longer enough anymore, right? It is, what is the thought behind this? Who is the audience? What is the experience? All the stuff we've been talking about. I think it's just so important and so meaningful in that space. I think that strategy, approach, intentionality goes into portfolio planning and tiering your events, right? Which ones get what budget, which ones get which approach. There's so much detail that goes in. I think that is the big thing for me that I see changing for event marketers or corporate event marketers.
Yeah. And this is why we start with like the event environment first, right? Because that sounds like that is expectations of them based on the ecosystem and how it's changed, right? If the company owner is wondering, man, I'm spending a lot on events, is it really worth it? That's going to channel down to the event marketer. And now everybody knows that they have multiple options. So you're going to have to be able to, you said it, right? Like you said, this idea of you got to be able to get stakeholder buy-in is a skill set that you have to have. Tell me more about that.
So I think for very high level event marketers that are dealing with the executive level teams, they have to build a business case. That's what I'm hearing over and over. That's what the discussions are about, the questions that they're asking, the things that they need. Everything is about building a business case to go to executives and say, look, this is pushing forward our business objectives. This is pushing forward our goals. Here's how. Here's the metrics. Here's the qualitative and here's the quantitative data. You need both. Right? So you're building a business case. And I think, man, overall, that is how you get buy-in. When you have buy-in, you get more room to work. And then you get everybody on your same page, which I think opens up events to really being dangerous.
That feels like the underrated skill set that has popped up on this show a couple of times now that people don't talk about, right? Like I remember talking about the difference between an event organizer and a marketer, but the idea of like investing in the skill set of how you sell upstream seems like a major thing to talk about.
So I think how you work laterally is really, really important. How do you work with sales? How do you work with marketing? How do you work with go-to-market? That's really, really important. You need to get them on your train, right?
Yeah.
You need salespeople for pre-show marketing. They need to understand the event, the purpose, the intention, what you're trying to achieve, how it benefits them. That's laterally. You're working across departments, right? Because you're in events. Events is events.
Yep.
You get marketing, you get sales, go to market. It depends how big the organization is. The next piece is working up to the executives. Do you have their buy-in or not? Because if you don't have their buy-in, it will always be difficult. It'll always be questioned. It will always be listening to subjective opinions of someone's like, these trade shows, this event doesn't do anything. Oh, it's a big spend. Oh, we're spending too much. Oh, it's like, those are great things to say, but they are disgustingly subjective. Where is the information? Where is the data, right? And when you can get that buy-in by showing them hard numbers or even soft numbers, even numbers, it's not like, hey, we spent $1 million on this event and it's going to produce $1 million this year, and then the lifetime value becomes 10 and every year. But you know what I mean? Like, there's getting that buy-in. It's presenting a business case. If you're talking to executives, they want a business case. So you're working both ways. You're working up to present a business case, and you're working horizontally to get the support that you need and make it a team effort. Because events is not just an event department. It's so many players inside of it.
I like that you clarified that for me, because it's not, so it's stakeholder buy-in. Those are the people that you need to work alongside of. You have to be able to rally the troops to be able to execute all the things around the event that make what happens before and after the event successful.
Yes.
And then there is building a business case. That's the idea of, hey, person who cuts the check, I can show you why this is valuable to you and to the resources of our company. And you said something interesting to me, that is kind of like, if you can do that, that's when you get to the reason why we all do this, which is ideas, experiences, creative. You want to say a little bit about that?
I just think that's when you get freed up. That's when you're not worried about just executing. When executives have that buy-in, smart executives end up pouring into it. You know what I mean? And they give you more resources. They give you the tools. They give you the freedoms to go and operate the way that you want. Now, I think you should be doing those things no matter what, right? I mean, when you get that executive buy-in because you're built a business case for them, I think if you talk to 100 event marketers that are working for big corporate companies or even smaller corporate companies, the ones that have executive buy-in versus the ones that don't have executive buy-in, I think there's a big difference there. There's a delta in the way they feel, in the way they operate, in the freedoms in which they have.
Yeah. Freedom is such a big thing, right? Like this idea that you get to do the stuff that you want to do, not the stuff that you think.
You get to take chances.
You get to take chances.
You get to take chances. And events and marketing is all about chances, doing stuff different, doing it outside the box, right? And you don't get that. You get a lot of companies, they do the same thing every year. They'll use the same booth. No. We just want to reuse it. Oh, no. We're going to do it this way. This worked. And you get stalled in this same pattern.
Yep.
Right. Because you can't take a chance because you don't have a business case. And that means it's a cost of doing business. You're just because you don't spend more. You don't even know if you should spend less. You don't know because you haven't built any kind of business case.
But by bringing it back to that idea of cost of doing business versus strategy, it's kind of saying how this all compounds together, right? Because if on one side you're saying you got to treat every event different, and in order to have success, you got to do this. But if you're not able to build a business case and they're just saying, well, let's just do it the way we've always done it, you're setting yourself up to success. So you're either in like a downward spiral because you can't build a business case, or you're building a business case and now you get to really tailor things and take chances and do the stuff.
I think that business case comes down to people. People know when they're talking to somebody that has a grip on something. So if you're talking to your CMO or you're talking to your CEO and you're running the event program, if you're talking about your event program in a tiered portfolio, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and you're saying, this is why this is tier 1, this is why this is tier 3, this is why this gets deployed $50,000, this is why this gets deployed $1 million. This is why the approach here is we're sending 6 people, we're running a dinner, we have a 10 by 10, only 2 of them are in the booth in the 10 by 10, the other 4 are running meetings at the hotel offsite. Hey, in the tier 3, in the $1 million spend, this is the team that goes, the CEO is there. Like, you're breaking it out to where it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the answer that people come back to is, well, we've always done it this way. What executive wants to hear we've always done it this way? You know what I'm saying? So I think,
or employee wants to hear that.
You probably have executives vice versa telling the event marketer, well, I've always done it this way.
Yeah.
right? So as the event marketer, be the one to shake the tree, be the one to build the business case, be the one to say, this is why we're tiering these events. Tiering your events, I guess we're going to get into that, which is essentially saying it's forcing you to categorize your events, right? It's forcing you to place an order of importance, order of size, order of budget allocation. It's forcing you to think about your approach. Your approach should not be the same for each one. Do you have the audience? I mean, we were talking with a potential customer the other day, and by diving into some of this stuff, some of the discussions are simple. Inside the booth, they don't get the ICP executive decision maker person that they want, but they do get the engineers, the people that influence, the people that are asking the questions and tinkering. And so the booth experience can't be built for the executives. It can be a smaller exhibit. It can be a smaller setup, enough to field the questions, do raffles, do giveaways, build some relationships, but big bucks got to be spent on the executives because they're at that show. They just don't go to the show floor. So they're offsite. So they run a crazy bomb ass dinner, top notch, X hundred a plate, the whole thing, because that's where the business is done there. So that's what I mean by approach. What if they just blew all their money on a big booth, but there's no executives walking in? So that's the things. Those are the levels of discussion that you have to be having in order to execute properly.